Shalom. I'm Sara Rigler, and I'm very excited to share with you the story of Catherine Perez-Shakdam. How did I even know this story? A friend of mine sent me something, by email, an article that had appeared on the Times of Israel. This was just like a week ago. It was a story about this woman, a woman born to two Jewish parents in France, who ended up converting to Islam and becoming a very devoted follower of Shiite Islam. That's the kind of Islam they practice in Iran. And she married an Islamic man from Yemen, but she didn't follow his kind of Islam, which was Sunni Islam. She became a Shiite, and she came very close to the regime in Iran. They invited her to Iran. She was a journalist and a political analyst, and she ended up, becoming a mouthpiece for them, including their very anti-Israel stances. And in this piece in the Times of Israel, Catherine said that she realized later that she was 100% wrong. Well, I read those words and I said, wow, can any of us admit ever that we're 100% wrong? I mean, comes time Yom Kippur, before Yom Kippur, we have to admit our sins. And we say, okay, I was wrong to do this, I was wrong to say that. But to actually admit I was 100% wrong, I mean, this is like, I said, I've got to meet this person. I've got to get to know her. So I did. And I really feel like she's my soul sister, Catherine. She lives in England, and I'm going to be interviewing her this coming Sunday live on this channel. I hope you'll join me. It's going to be at 8 p.m. here in Israel, 1 p.m. On the East Coast of the United States. That would be 10 a.m. on the West Coast of the United States, and you can figure out other times according to where you live. But that's this coming Sunday. Live interview with her. You'll have a chance, even to ask her your own questions. So I wrote an article for H.com, which is going up today, called the Jewish, in quotation mark, in parentheses, the Jewish darling of the Iranian Mullahs. And she was accused by them when she came out as a Jew and a Zionist, just very recently, within the last 3 months, on the blog of the Times of Israel. Iran, at first they didn't notice what was going on, but it took them 3 months. Finally, just a couple of weeks ago, they got wind of it, that their darling, who they had used as their mouthpiece, who was on Iranian television all the time and, spouting whatever their whole positions, and especially their anti-Israel positions, that she has recanted completely and is now publicly a Zionist, admitting her Jewish roots, and is now a Zionist. So they just went after her and called her, said that she was always a spy from the Mossad, which was quite ridiculous. No, she was a sincere Shiite until she wasn't. And so you've got to read the article, because it's like an amazing, amazing story of how she got to be who she was. And the main thing is that her father, it all goes back to the Holocaust, as almost everything does, right? Her father's family were Spanish Jews, and her grandfather was a communist. Her paternal grandfather was a communist in Spain in the 30s, which was not a good thing to do because Franco's fascist government really targeted communists. So they fled from Spain, and they decided they were going to British Mandate Palestine through North Africa. They got to Tunisia, and they stayed in Tunisia for a while. And then, of course, World War II came along, and Germany conquered France. And there was this puppet government, the Vichy French government, which was pro-Nazi. And France was really in charge of Tunisia. So now you had a Nazi-backed government ruling Tunisia, and they made concentration camps, not death camps. They didn't have gas chambers and kill people, but they had these concentration camps where they put Catherine's grandfather's family in this concentration camp, and they were just people were left to just die of starvation or disease. One of their sons died of starvation, and they would have probably died also. But Catherine's grandfather was a doctor, and one of the guards got typhoid, and he healed him. And in gratitude for that healing, the guard let Catherine's grandfather and his family escape. So they survived the Holocaust, but were very, very scarred by the trauma of being in that camp, losing a son, and just all the horror of that concentration camp. And the result was that Catherine's father became a real self-hating Jew. He hated his Jewish identity. He hated everything about being Jewish. When he was 18 years old, he moved to France to go to university, and he just tried to become a regular French, person, and just totally not just dropped his Jewish identity, but despised his Jewish identity. He became a self-hating Jew. And that was Catherine's father. Her mother was not like that. Her mother came from a different strain. I tell about it in the article. But her mother died when she was 11 years old. So she was left with this anti-Semitic, self-hating Jew father. But she wasn't left with him for very long because he remarried very quickly to a Christian woman. And there was no place for Catherine in his life. They shipped her off to an elite boarding school. And that's where she stayed until she graduated high school. And then at the age of 18, went to England for university, where she met a handsome Muslim man from Yemen, and she married him, as many girls do when they don't have a family and they're searching for a family. And he had what she didn't have. He had a stable family and a strong religious identity. He was Muslim. And he told her, you have to convert to Islam. She had no problem doing that. She didn't know what it meant, but she had no Judaism. She was raised with zero Judaism, so she converted to Islam. Turned out she didn't like Sunni Islam. Her husband was a very devout practitioner of Sunni Islam. There are two very, very divergent streams of Islam that go back to one generation after the death of Muhammad, and that's Sunni, which is what most of the people in the Middle East are talking, Egypt, most of Syria, Jordan, Arabs who live here in the land of Israel, most of the Saudi Arabia, half of Yemen, most of the Gulf states, they're Sunni. And then you have Shia Islam, which is Iran, and half of Yemen, and a certain part of Syria that is the ruling dictatorship of Syria. It's very complicated, and there's a lot of enmity between these two strains, a lot of enmity. So Catherine married this man. She had two children, first a son and then a daughter, and they moved to Yemen to be near his family. And his family never let her forget that she was a Jew. She didn't know anything about Judaism, had no relationship to it, but that's who she was. And their Jew hatred came out all the time. Every time there was something on television about Israel, they would say, your people did this, your people did that. And she was always bullied. In general, it was a bad marriage. It was a marriage of a lot of emotional abuse. She stayed in it she didn't really know what to do. They moved back after 4 years. They moved back to England, and a year later, she decided on a divorce. Why? What was the straw that broke the camel's back? She was drawn to Shia Islam. I talk about it in the article, what she was drawn to, why she thought it was a very noble path. And her husband was a Sunni Muslim. And he was really disdained her path, and she just couldn't live with that anymore. So because of that, she insisted that he leave, and she got a divorce. And at some point, but she was a political analyst and a journalist, also an economist. She has 2 master's degrees. So at some point, Catherine was noticed by the regime in Iran because she was a sincere Shia Muslim. And they invited her to Iran in 2015. It was a conference on Palestine. And again, you have to read in this article, her description. The article is mostly Catherine's own words. She describes what she called like being in the belly of the beast. All these people who were absolutely not just the head of, the Ayatollah of Iran and the head of Hamas and the head of Hezbollah, all the people who were absolutely committed to this death of the Jewish people. And she saw, and this is important, she saw it's not just anti-Israel. It wasn't about Israel. It was about the Jews. They talk in terms of anti-Zionism as most anti-Semites do, because it's not cool to talk about to be an anti-Semite, but you can respectably be an anti-Zionist. So they put it in those terms. She said she was there in the inner circle of the Iranians. They didn't care at all about the Palestinians. It was just an excuse for them to get down on the Jews. And when they talk about destroying Israel, they mean destroying all the Jews. She was in their inner circle. She got to interview the man who became the president of Iran. She doesn't know how she did it. I mean, people who were loyal journalists for decades didn't get the inside track that Catherine got. But, and this is really a tell-all interview I had with her, they came on to her. They came on to her sexually. They propositioned her. She was a beautiful woman in her 30s, beautiful woman, and they came on to her and propositioned her. And that, of course, turned her off completely because she had this idealistic vision of these very religious Shiite Muslims. And it turned out that we're talking about the leadership. I know that some of you will say, well, in Judaism too, we have our scandals. We have our, occasionally this rabbi or that rabbi who turns out to be having, affairs or molesting, but not our leaders, not our leaders. I've talked to you about Raphaim Kanievsky. I mean, I can talk to you about many, many of our leaders. We don't have that. And she was very disillusioned because the leadership propositioned her. And she came back to England. She went to Iran, I think, 5 different times over a 2-year period. And she was on their television all the time, and she was spouting anti-Israel stuff. And at some point, she came back to England, and she was just disillusioned. And she took off her hijab, her head covering. Now, when she was on Iranian TV, when she was in Iran, that's the law, you have to wear the hijab, the whole, head and like around like that. But when she got back to England, she took it off, and they got wind of it. And the head of the dean of the University of Tehran called her and was like bullying her. You have to wear it when you're on, when you're going to be on TV in Iran. And she was like, who are you? You're not my father. You're not my husband. Who are you to tell me what to do? She just got to a point where she was tired of being told what to do and being what she called bullied. So the Iranians at that point just like faded away. They didn't want anything more to do with her. And she was really left, again, identityless. So now she's not, who is she? She's not a Shia Muslim, doesn't know anything about Judaism. Who is she? She tells me that she was saved by her daughter Rian. She came home one day from work, and Rian was there, and Rian was watching videos by Rudy Rochman, who's a Zionist activist. And Rian said, "You've got to watch this video." And Catherine said, "Oh, I'm tired. I'll watch it later. I'm not, no, leave me alone." And her daughter just really confronted her and insisted, "You must watch this video. You are always telling us that you have to see both sides of the story, but you don't see both sides of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. You've never been willing to look at the Israeli side." So Catherine gave in to her daughter and watched the video. And it was like suddenly just the blinders fell off her eyes. She was amazed at what she heard. As she said to me, she said, sometimes you're not ready to hear something. And then the time comes when you're ready to hear it. And at this point, this was 2 years after her separation from Tehran, she was ready to hear it. And she heard it. And she started watching other videos by Rudy. And he talked about Jewish identity. And she realized for the first time in her life that she didn't have to hate herself, because up to that point, she had been a self-hating Jew. And she analyzed it. She's a political analyst. She's very smart. And she analyzed where that came from. It's in the article. I hope you'll read the H.com article going up today. Anyway, she watched these videos and these Rudy Rochman videos, and she was really like blinders fell from her eyes. And she said she knew everything he said, she knew, not because she had studied it. She knew on her inside. I think we've all had that experience, that we're hearing something for the first time, but we've always known it. And that was how she was. She was hearing it for the first time, but she'd always known it. And she realized she didn't have to hate herself anymore, and she could feel that she was a Jew and be happy to be a Jew, proud of being a Jew. And it took her a couple more years after that before she started writing blogs for the Times of Israel and really came out as a Zionist just in November of 2021, a few months ago. She came out as a Jew and as a Zionist. And I hope you will tune in to the live interview with her this coming Sunday. Again, it will be 8:00 at night in Israel, 1:00 p.m. on the East Coast of America, 10 a.m. on the West Coast of America, and it will be on the station. And how do you get the link? I think you just somehow you'll go on this station and you'll see that this is that you can tune into the live video and be part of it and ask her your own questions. She's an amazing, beautiful, beautiful soul, a wonderful person. I really love Catherine. But she had the courage to say, I was 100% wrong. I hope you'll join me on Sunday and read the article.